and to have sort of a two-way conversation, both perhaps tell a little bit about what we were thinking about, and then to get some more concrete suggestions from you about what kind of tools you thought were necessary, and what directions you thought would be good for PPRC to go with.
So
your experience.
I guess like .NET is like too much of a catchy word, right? So we should probably try to define it to some extent before we get started. I think John, I've seen your name somewhere, but I don't think we met. And Mark also we haven't met. The rest of the people kind of know the background. I've been in for 4.5 years with the IIS team, so building the IIS servers, and about 2 years with the MSN Search, building a service on top of it. And the last 2 weeks I've been with the .NET NetOps hosting team, or .NET services hosting team, whatever they call it. But so I have both the server as well as the services side of experience to deal with. .NET is like a little catchy because I think there's a one whole part of the company which thinks it's all about XML, URT, and the new programming model that comes about. That's .NET. There's another half of the company which thinks basically like any services that we run, which are all having multiple machines talk to multiple machines, doing some work for the end user, is .NET Services world of things. And there's a whole thing under Bob Moore right now. There's everything is prefixed with .NET. There's the UI experience, mobility experience, knowledge worker experience, framework experience, runtime, and then partner services. So all these clubbed together belong there. But I think my internalization...
The third half of the company just thinks it doesn't mean anything. It's just hacking the .NET onto all the
Well, I think you're probably like keeping your long-term vision of the world, right? This is like a buzzword for the next 5 years in some sense. But reality is, I think the world of applications running on a PC desktop is just vanishing, right? Nobody writes to Win32 that much and on a particular single machine perspective. Every application today wants to talk to some other application with actually multiples of these applications. Number one. Number two is there is this cloud out there, and there is something that resides in the cloud. And cloud is usually black box, and some of us develop some code, glue code, as well as use the platform code as appropriate to kind of run things on the cloud. And I think those two are probably like will never vanish. And internally, like however what language we use and what tools we use is like really that's evolving thing. So maybe like if we set ourselves in that scope, we kind of talk a little bit more on it. So I'm not sure how you want to go about doing this.
Probably makes sense for you to start and sort of tell us a little bit about the issues you've seen based on your experience with Search. Sort of, what proved really hard in terms of building Search, and where do you think tools would have been helpful in building Search? Or the other way to look at it is, what kind of tools did you guys have to build yourselves, and sort of the other groups down at Red West building themselves because they didn't exist, but they had to make the stuff successful?
Good. Well, Rohit can introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Rohit. Okay, I'm Lars. Thank you for coming. Sorry about being there. Why don't we go around and do the introductions again? Yeah, sorry.
I'm Amitabh Shrivastava. John Pincus.
For about 7, 8 years before that.
Yeah.
And so I came in from more of a client background into MSN. And a lot of stuff that goes on there, I'll switch into what's happening at MSN itself. A lot of stuff that's happening there is sort of, by MSN I mean MSN.com, not the entire network. A lot of stuff is sort of more ad hoc than I would like to see. There's not as much formal process. As a result, things break fairly often. And we have some tools, but we need to do a lot more on them. And typically with the development teams that we have web development engineers, for instance. We don't have enough time to do the tools because there's the business requirement that's driving us to have these feature of the day, if you would, a polls thing or something or the other. So the devs get diverted to doing that, and the tools typically take a back seat to this. And that leads to problems because it's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy because we don't have the tools. Therefore, it takes us longer, and that cycle repeats.
I think we've all seen that happen.
Right. So what we have done is we've gone on and hired some people, and what we want to do is focus them on getting the tool straight and sort of let the live site and the feature of the day slow down just a tad. So we won't take the new guys and put them onto new features. They'll be doing more of the infrastructure work. And the stuff where we are hurting the most is in the content publishing tools area. So there's a group, I wonder if you guys have talked to Rico Mariani.
Give you this contact first.
Rico M, RICOM. And so there's a MSN platforms team that does these tools. And they're coming up with a new rev. I think they're slated to come out with it in late March, early April. And yeah, so it would be useful for you guys to sync up with them, see if you could do interesting bits and pieces there. So what their stuff is supposed to be is to look at our space in general. We are mainly a content aggregator and in some sense display, right? We also do a bunch of what we call partners. Have you talked to them about partners?
No, I haven't.
So partners being things like Radio Shack, Dell, Best Buy, right? So if you go to presario.compact.net, you'll see a page that looks very much like MSN, but with some of their own branding and some of their own content. And so we have about 15 of these. And we want to get up to about 50 more of such things. And that's where our back end starts not scaling well, and our processes don't scale very well. With the front end, of course, we have some problems, but not as much as with the back end systems. And that's where we need to spend the brunt of our resources getting that part straightened out.
Let me ask you a question. Maybe it's a naive question. When you say backend, you mean like the databases behind the system?
Right. So actually, what I mean is, by front end, I mean the live servers. The servers that the consumer hits when he types msn.com.
And running IIS, presumably.
Correct. And by the back end, I mean, so these front end things have most of the information in them in dictionary files. So by the back end, I mean the system that churns out these dictionary files and copies them out to the front end server. So that's the piece where we run into problems. So to give you an example, there are 13 of these partner sites like Compact, Best Buy, etc. Most of these have similar content modules, and there are some differences. And we need to press these out and transfer them to the live site servers. Now this pressing takes a while, and we want to be able to have new content, let's say once every 15 minutes. And you have 15 sites, so that means each one can take no longer than a minute, obviously. Now when we scale up to 50 of these, this system will not scale. So we have to redo this thing and make it happen. So things like that.
Yeah, there are two kinds of partners that we talk about. One is the partner that he talks about, where basically we have the content bits and data in our system, in our system meaning a database that kind of houses this thing. It might be a set of SQL replicated databases. And we take this, run through a combination of SQL code, some Perl, some XML, XSL translation, and the ultimate thing is like either produce an XML output or produce HTML output. Right? Today you kind of take this and kind of propagate it out, but there are a couple of processes missing. One is the HTML or XML that is generated may not be even valid sometimes. Sometimes we get into snags where it becomes a problem. It gets propagated to the live servers, and then we figure out there's a problem, we backprop and get a new propagation out. And all these bits in the current model, we have to ship it for multiple markets as well. So which adds more burden in terms of validation and performance of executing these transformations. The second set of partners are what I would call dynamic partners, which these guys do quite a bit as well. Like when you go to MSN homepage, you have the stock codes, and you pull it out from some stock code server, which is dynamically supplying this data. So there are such dynamic content modules which kind of supply data as well. They have built kind of caching infrastructure to keep things in memory and kind of fetch with TTL and stuff like that. But I don't think we've looked at how well it does and how well we do the memory.
Let's start pursuing some of these. Like, why didn't you guys look at how well it performs? Is it because there aren't tools? There isn't time to do it?
Both. Well, the tools, I think, the ones that I am familiar with, like we look at performance counters. I was going to get down to that, and we look at like IceCat doesn't do data stuff, right? This is more about data. In perfmon, I just wrote out some notes. Like one of the problems that we have is we can't look at individual counters and make any decision. We have to look at cross-group counters. Number one. Number two, we have to look at the aggregated correlations across these counters, and then we have to have group thresholds. And we do not know how to set them as well. We kind of have some fuzzy ideas of how to set these things and kind of monitor. So if I get a perfmon log, I can look at it, and since I've been looking at it for enough time, I have some sense of what it means sometimes. But I might not. Again, it's a question of human error, right? I cannot process like 100 different perfmon streams.
Right.
So I fail. So it's both I think the number of streams as well as the visual display also is pretty limited.
So when you're looking at these perfmon counters, what is it you're trying to find out? I mean, what is the question you're asking?
Well, it feeds into multiple locations. One is short term. I think there was one time, I'll give you a history. When we deployed our beta bits on MSN Search, immediately operations came back and said, hey, you're leaking memory. We kind of tested in our lab and we never felt we were leaking memory. Right?
How did they know you were leaking memory?
Because they just saw the gradient of virtual memory growth being so high and the gradient of available memory falling down so fast as well. So these two counters cross-correlated. They just say, oh, you're using up some memory. And also like the number of bytes allocated in a process. Right? That's what their individual counters kind of thresholded. Again, this visual inspection, they would love to have what is the gradient metric, and then that gradient metric has to kind of shift with respect to the hardware. If I have a large hardware box, it doesn't really matter how much I grow, because I'm probably putting more load on the system. Because sometimes the thresholds are set with a small hardware in mind, and then once you scale out, it doesn't scale the parameters. So they looked at this and they reported to us, and we kind of looked at it, and we wanted to find out, okay, who is using this memory? And there wasn't any good tool to do that. You can't run bounce checker on this stuff because server, it's doing lots and lots of allocations. It's not able to kind of trace it properly. We could not put kind of a custom trace. Let me capture all my allocs and freeze. That doesn't work because I'm using a lot of blue components from 100 different parties, and each one has a different allocation model. And sad and behold, they all have their own allocators too.
Yes.
Right. So that's a problem. The third problem was even if I'm able to instrument my own thing, again I get a spew of data which I need to kind of munch through to get it. And again, we're talking about a custom tool now, which is not scalable across multiple groups. So finally, what we did is we went to NT. The NT's debugger has a bang heap command. I'm not sure how many people used it. So it basically dumps each and every block of memory that NT thinks it has allocated. So we took multiple snapshots of that. We wrote a custom diff to look at what is going on. We found a particular pattern of objects are getting allocated, and then we found out what that object is. And then finally, it resolved to that OLE automation was caching extensively, a lot of data. It was not really a leak, and after a while, it kind of stabilizes. The gradient initially is very bad, right? So that's an example of a complex system with multiple different DLLs and components coming from multiple parties, each having their own way of optimization. We have to look beyond the little perfmon stream, and kind of, so if we are able to look at the group thresholding and aggregation and correlate that with the components that we have, that's like a huge benefit to pinpoint what's going on. And also, like you're talking about lots of data.
So when you guys should all jump in with questions too. I don't want to ask all the questions, but so when you guys sort of roll the stuff out, I mean, are most of the problems you encounter when the stuff goes live performance-driven issues like this one, or are they correctness things where there's something dysfunctionally wrong with the service or the site?
Functionally wrong with the service.
So just there's a bug in it in the traditional sense, as opposed to something like this, which I see as more of a
HTML was an example of a bug in the site.
Right. I think I'll give you another example of incorrect HTML. Right. So this happened 3 weeks back. Search. All of a sudden, one of the search entry points stopped working, or rather, we were getting failures, and it had worked till the day before, and we didn't even update the front end boxes. We didn't even put new bits. We didn't do anything. It stopped working all of a sudden, and so this was happening for multi-word queries. If I send in more than one words in my query, That's when it started failing. So there's something special going on, but we didn't understand. It was actually a 2-year-old code, so we haven't even revved that code bit. And after debugging it, we found out that actually we were getting timeouts from we thought it's a problem from Inktomi, who supplies data for us, but it is not Inktomi. It is a timeout that's coming from our ad system. Our ad system, which is again in the cloud somewhere, they have a set of boxes which we can talk to dynamically. They have upgraded the bits on this ad system. And this new ad system does not respect HTML encoding of the multi-word queries, like the blank character gets encoded in a particular fashion. They wanted URL encoding of this stuff, which is a slightly different set of rules. And that caused problem for us. And basically they took a long time to kind of process it, they failed. And as a result, our service failed. So the example, I think this is more an example of an availability or reliability problem, without any change of code, but some parts of the system kind of changing.
How much work was it to find out that was responsible?
Well, so none of us knew the code, right? Because it's 2-year-old code, everybody in the team is pretty new. So we looked at the code, we couldn't find anything, we didn't find anything visibly wrong. Then we had a tracer on, so we turned on the tracer and we found out the ad system was failing, and then we started questioning why did the ad system fail, and then we learned that they had upgraded the ad bits, which we kind of never knew. There was no way to go find out what is the bits running on there as well, right? So that's, and then after we found the problem, the fix was very easy. Finding the problem took almost 2 days, and the service was unavailable at the time, which is pretty bad experience.
So let me go back to my original question. So we started this off as sort of, there's that type of problem, and then there's the problem you mentioned before, which is a performance one, where you sort of, you saw the memory usage going through the ceiling. Sort of, how much of the problems you have fall in each of these categories? If you just sort of take them as big, maybe overlapping categories.
On our particular site, we don't have those many perf problems, because we have actually a perf bed. We have a team of testers who do the perf testing before it goes live. So those things we typically catch before it actually goes out on the live servers. But we oftentimes do not catch just HTML errors, for instance. What happens is we do live props almost every day. So some code needs to change, etc. And since we are doing it every day, there's not that much time to go through a full test pass. So you only test the areas around that and prop it live. And sometimes things break because you didn't test it in a particular browser or things like that.
So is that where the error is coming from, the content, the HTML itself?
The HTML, yeah. So something is malformed, or some weird interaction with something. For instance, we have different components on the page. You talk to the messenger TLS or the messenger ActiveX object, right? And the way you instantiate it might have changed, or they might have new bits available. So that interaction sometimes breaks. And what we would love, here's one other thing that we would love to have, is an automated test suite, which we don't really have. So we do have some automation using Trident and visual test and whatnot, but it's not really as comprehensive as it could be. And again,
it's not multi-language friendly as well.
And it's not multi-browser friendly. So we make a pass with IE because it lends itself to automation. And Netscape, we either assume that it's correct, at least in the basic stuff, or you have a manual pass going over it. And there are two reasons. One is tools not being that easily available, and second, just lack of resources. The test team is so slammed just testing new things coming in every day that for them to take out 3 testers and do test tools would be a hit. It would be almost better to have...
and even if they were to do it, it will be very hard-coded for that particular
service.
Because it won't be across multiple services.
Right. Because testers, I think, by definition, are very focused on that one thing, so it won't scale to other groups. Yeah. And when you change your site, well, then the test suite goes to waste.
So when you say a testing tool, you're talking about something that sort of would serve as a client, like a browser, that could actually drive the MSN site and look at the HTML that came back.
Right. For instance, take simple things like, and this isn't done, I'm pushing to get this thing done because it's simple enough. On the MSN site, there's a little scarab that says passport sign in. And when you click on it and you type in your Hotmail, whatever, it changes to say passport sign up. And just that basic thing, to click on the damn thing, make it and verify that it now says passport sign out instead of passport sign in, and these are images. There's no text in it. So just simple things. You can do it, we haven't done it. And so some guy sits down and manually does it by hand to make sure that the thing is done. And all this stuff lends itself to automation. We just haven't got around to it.
I'll put it another way, I think that's also like there's no clean automation framework for us to kind of put it in. If we had one of those, that will go quite a bit of way, and I think that's something that you guys can invest quite a bit to think about what is a framework, and if it's writing scripts to a framework, right, which testers can do,
Right.
But they don't usually come up with a good framework.
So in your contracts, when you're hiring out some function to third parties, you mentioned Tommy and so on,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any protocol? It appears that they updated something, one of these third parties updated something without it, like the protocol.
MSN ad servers.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the external partners are very good.
We all know that the external parties next door are part of the external parties.
So because we have
building, but
they have strict service level agreements with the external parties. Internally, we don't. And actually, talking about SLAs, service level agreements, we don't actually monitor the SLAs at all. Now, to give an example, we have like latency expectations with Inktomi contracts that we have, and Inktomi has much better monitoring tools than we do to deal with it.
These are their own homegrown tools.
Right. As such.
well, because they've signed a contract on their side, they want to defend themselves, so they monitor really carefully.
Oh,
True.
they can also scale it across their, I mean, they're using this across all of their customers, right? Not just
Oh
across
yes,
us.
I know, and in particular in Inktomi's case, with this 200 millisecond or whatever, so LSLA, they signed.
Yeah, but that's like really at their end of it. Like
Right.
we don't have any way of looking at what is the networking overhead and
Right.
anything else that goes on the network. I think that is another problem that I shared with Amitabh and Jim. I'm not sure if anyone is right to go with that.
So let me ask you another question about this testing. So is there anything out there that's a commercial tool?
There are a couple, actually. I have them in email. Our test manager is looking at them. I don't remember the name. So yeah, there are a couple that would do, for instance, that would automate Netscape also. But I personally haven't looked at it. And the test manager guy says that you can take it to a certain extent, but it starts failing. And then, with the live site, they always have this trade-off that they keep making. That, okay, I can make it work, I need to take 3 people out of the loop for a month and a half or whatever that duration is. And then there are these features coming through and no, I can't do it. So I'll do it next month, And the thing just keeps getting postponed out. So it's almost like we need to almost staff that thing up, make that happen. And so that's what we ended up doing finally. We said, okay, this is too much pain. We'll staff a team of just automation testers and write the automation. That's all they'll do. And see where we go from there.
So they're going to do the automation on IE?
On IE, correct. And we already have performance automation on the back end. So if you want to just see something like, okay, let me have 5,000 open ASP connections, but idle. And now let me start hitting the site. Because this is what we actually see on the live stream. Let me now start hitting the site and see how many ASPs per second can we handle. And then we are going to roll out this new feature. Let's say, so usually we are at about roughly 40 odd ASP requests per second. Now, let me deploy this feature and let me see where the ASPs per second go. And if they fall to 35, like when we had the Olympics, right? We had a new content module called the Olympic module out. And the ASPs per second fell from 41 to about 33, 34. And we said, that's fine, because in a month this will go away. And for the month we can take this pain. Because where the ASPs per second come in is not in user perception, but you need to buy new boxes or not. Right? And
I think to put the number in context, right, we're talking about 33 requests per second, and we get about 20 million queries a day?
30 plus million.
30 plus million requests a day. So that's like you can calculate, it's almost like 30 times 100, it's on 3,000 requests per second almost. And they have like 40, 50 boxes.
42 boxes out there. So
and each is a 4-proc box with huge amount of memory. So and each box costs anywhere from 20 to 50K.
actually with the boxes, the price of the hardware is not the gating factor. It is the price to keep it running.
Operation cost.
Right. And so which is why for a year we haven't had new boxes. and we don't intend to have any. It's part of many people's review goals to not buy boxes. if you have to buy boxes, many people's review goals fail there.
So the response time can go to hell as long as they don't spend money.
The numbers that I remember, like it's 5K per box per month is the overhead minimum. So we're talking about like lot of boxes. MSN has.
We have 42.
MSN as a whole would have like probably like 2,000. Excluding Hotmail, we probably have about 2,000, 3,000 boxes right now.
So why did the performance automation so far ahead of the correctness?
Oh, because the performance automation can be automated easier. It's in some sense also a sexy thing to work on. Right? You can use all the tools. You can look at IIS. Whereas with the stuff you're saying, oh, did the sign in change to sign out? You say, who cares?
But you didn't ask this question, right? Which is, did we do anything with the performance automation? It's like, have you pushed it beyond like 40 or 50 requests per second? And the answer is no. We kind of keep a status quo on the number that we got, and that's where it remains. And we don't have actually deeper introspection into the numbers that we get out of performance. Because we get like 40 requests per second, we don't know which component is causing a problem and what part of the code is causing a problem, because the code is constructed out of not just C++, but a whole other set of languages. And I think that is something which I've been pushing for quite a while.
So all you know is that you can drive it at 40 or whatever ASPs per second. You just have tools to shoot that many requests now. Is that right?
Right.
How does this compare with like Yahoo or other competitors, like the number of boxes or number of queries? Like
Yahoo,
the scale as well as the...
Yahoo, I'm willing to bet, has fewer boxes because they run Unix boxes.
They probably have not multi-processor boxes, or like they have one or two processor boxes at a cheaper price. But they, like the number of...
If they're running Sun boxes, they won't be cheaper. They'll be
they're
incredibly more expensive. I don't know what
They're actually free BSD.
Free BSD.
For instance, eBay has what, 2 big Sun boxes? What does eBay run? Right. So.
But do you have any sense for what it costs them? You just said it doesn't matter what you pay for the boxes. Does it cost them more or less to operate the boxes?
For Yahoo?
Yeah.
I think it got, like the numbers that it got last year I presented to the Mindswap is their cost of operation is lower than us, which is pretty daunting. But I think they got a lot of automation out of Unix and like less reliability problems as well, which prior to Win2K our reliability problems were a little higher. With Win2K the number of problems has gone down to a reasonable extent. It's still there, and I think we haven't started pruning down some operational resources which we deployed, because our traffic has been going up, so we kind of are keeping the same, like for search we have the same 2 people that we used to have in operations, but instead of 25 machines that we used to have last year, we right now have about 96 machines that are in operations. So the scale has grown, the traffic has grown from like 4 million to about 35 million right now, so we kind of use the same set of people. That cost us reasonably okay.
I think we're going to have to watch our operational cost metric very carefully as we go forward. Because
So
I don't think we can afford to be intrinsically higher cost than Yahoo or something.
yeah, well, on the internet nobody knows if I'm running a dog operating system or a foo operating system.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, the tie-in with the operational cost is none of us actually look at what component leads to this operational cost. We have the 2 ends of the metric. I know the code to some extent. I know the number of boxes that we deploy. We do not know the connection between these 2, and we do not know the networking topology cost. None of any of the cost is getting attributed. Like there is no even a logical measure, let alone a real dollar measure of looking at that.
There isn't somebody whose job it is to sort of figure that out.
No.
Like a cost analyst or something.
There is actually. There are financial analysts who kind of do the metrics and the budget.
Yeah, I don't know about the financial guys.
That's different.
Yeah, engineering cost analysis, or there's nobody whose job.
See, here's what I find also, which is that if they leave it, for instance, to me, to say, okay, design the whole thing and include the ops end also, then I'm sort of going to lean towards making it easier for development, etc., to get the thing through, right? Take a simple example. Some of the images that we have on the machines, right? They just have plain Win2K. So I was asking them, why don't you put SQL Server on the thing also if you need it? So why don't you image with SQL Server? Because then we have to re-image these things from time to time. And it takes a while. They say it's a one-day turnaround. So if it's all in the image, it should be a 15-minute turnaround. So it seems logical to me that this thing should be imaged with SQL Server on it. But to the ops guys, they don't think so. They think that that leads to a plethora of images. They don't know what they're doing, etc. So for them, it's more cost optimal to not do it. So these kind of things also come into play, which is.
Could you repeat everything you just said?
Which gets to events. So I don't think the cost is purely in the cost of the machines or how fast your code runs. It's also what the human is going to do. What are you going to force the human? So this is anecdotal evidence. I don't know this for a fact, but apparently, how does data get onto the Yahoo servers? Right? Do they have some fancy? Obviously not. I'm sort of being facetious. Do they have some fancy DCOM architecture that calls all these interfaces and gets? No, they actually it gets there by SMTP, and there's some batch file like thing that pulls it out and does things. Why? Because apparently it's easy for the ops guy to understand it. So you don't need a level 70 guy to figure out what went wrong in the system. right? A simple employee can look at the thing and figure out, oh, this text file is missing, and therefore the thing is not working. It's as easy as that. So I think we tend to, as geeks, want to over-engineer the system to such an extent that the operations cost then goes up. And that's one thing to watch for.
So does anybody ever looked at the operations to sort of tell you guys, well, this doesn't really work, or that would be better if you did it this way, or they have a lot of trouble with this type of structure?
There was a talk actually, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, which said that what the ops guys want the devs to know or something like that. It was part of MSTE. I wonder if tapes or whatever the transcripts are available.
Must be recorded.
It was MSTE.
Actually, for some reason, that talk was not recorded, I believe.
I have the slide.
Oh, you have it, okay.
We have some internal talks within individual properties, not across properties, and I think we also have a pigeon silo model. Each property is unto itself, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. We do not know the cross property costs.
Yeah, so for instance, we have our ops guys, we interact with them fairly often. So for instance, I know what the guy likes and what he doesn't like. But do I know what his ops guy likes and not likes? I can only guess based on mine.
Some of the different groups, what is the ratio of dev test and operations?
I can talk about Search, how it was. We had about 13 developers, about 15 testers, 15 to 16. There were about 2 real operations people, like system engineers, as we call them. There was one operations PM, actually 2 operations PM. One for dealing with partners and another for dealing with site management as itself. And there was one data flow operations PM/operator herself. Who was number of PMs we had was about 9 or 10. We had 2 more openings, but the staffing was 10. So that's kind of split. But one thing which has happened in the last 6 months, and I haven't seen results from that yet, is all the operations of MSN used to be kind of spread out. They all are now grouped under Rex Smith, who is a VP of Ops. He was a Ops manager for Hotmail, and he kind of owns the entire Ops tree as well. So there's kind of a dual relationship that happens. So one of the things that you guys should do is definitely bring him over and have a chat with him to understand it. We have to see what results come out. We haven't seen. Internally, they have a better model than what it used to be before. Rex Smith. He is usually in San Jose
now?
Yeah, he's a VP of Ops.
He's a VP of Ops now, I think.
He's usually in San Jose, so you have to schedule.
Do you have some type of a track of between 13 developers? What percentage of time goes into diagnosing operations problem versus new development versus in traditional product groups?
So I think if you look at the traditional, it's kind of a cycle, design, development, debugging, and then like post-release operational support, if you want to call it that way. About a year back, like the search team was kind of doing the first release, we had a lot of operations problem to deal with. And so we spent considerable time, I would probably say about 20 to 30% of our time in the operations bucket. And right now that's about probably 10 to 15%. I kind of lump things like putting traces in like in more an operational item that we kind of do, but then we don't do post-analysis of that stuff very good, right? So our time would be roughly like we have a 13-week development cycle, as we call it, in which there is about 3 weeks on design, 5 weeks on code development, about 4 weeks for code complete to release, which is like more testing, debugging time and integration, and then about a week of slop buffer that's available.
When you say testing, are you testing it on live systems, or this is
internal
testing on
Yeah.
your own system?
And then we kind of do a beta release about for 2 weeks or something like that. Which
Beta means you release it to a small group of the...
we release it on the site. Like actually today you can go look at beta.search.msn.com. And that's under a hidden rotation.
There's
Yeah.
an alternative URL
Right.
that some people go to and that you can get people
Yeah.
to go to.
So it just has lower load than the real one?
Yeah, you do, like we kind of sort of do throttled roll up.
Yeah,
Most of the properties do it. Basically, we start with like 10% of the load going to that property, and by the time we get to RTM, we kind of ramp it up to 40-50%, and then we switch it to 100%.
So we have a different.
Sorry.
We have a different cycle. Since we didn't do a major refresh, we did a major Artemis refresh maybe a year or so ago, and after that we just roll out little features. So there is no 12-week development, etc. It is 1 week of development for that particular feature with one guy, 2 testers, roll it out, and so on. So that's what we are doing.
And did you also do this beta testing before you put it on the live site?
No. So for the smaller ones, for the big revamp of MSN, there was a beta test, there was Moonport, etc. But for the smaller ones, it just goes to our servers in Saturn, which is a lab downstairs. And if it looks good there, we prop live. We give it a once over on the live, just make sure that it is.
You propagate live to everything? Or
To all those.
Slow?
Well, actually we leave it to the ops, but yeah, it goes through all of them fairly quickly. It gets copied and CRF immediately moves it over.
I was wondering about your test environment, sort of how closely related is it to your actual production environment?
It's very similar, if not identical. So the machines are the same.
Okay.
The configuration is the same. It's just in a lab in our building.
In some other cases, in some other services, we've heard stories about issues that were not reproducible.
Yeah, I think
Issues that
there
were
was a
not
different picture. Like in search, we observed like they were quite different. The operational setting. There are two major differences. One is the configuration itself is slightly different. The topology and the configuration, because we depend upon Infamy, who's a long haul partner for us. And we could run into networking problems and other things which is not reproducible exactly within the test environment, where we use emulators quite often. The second is operations tend to run the machine at a lower rate, which is like 40 to 50% CPU utilization. That's a quantifiable limit that they said. They don't look at other things very often. We try to run it at 100% as stress and performance runs, and because that's what we believe we should stress it for. So sometimes, interestingly enough, we don't get to reproduce some problems, like timing issues. They're very different on these two environments, and it's very rare. But when it happens, it's a problem. And also, like since we run it at 100% CPS, he said like perf is kind of sexy. Sometimes people look at the throughput and then we can say, oh, we do very good, but then our latency might be really worse, and it is usually worse. Which in operation setting they see it immediately.
In our case, one of the reasons server performance has sort of not been a high priority is that latency there is about 70 milliseconds to turn the request around. And if you are on the modem, the user time, where the user sees the whole thing, is about 10 to 12 seconds. And so therefore, there's a lot more to be gained for us by doing this. Of course, making the latency smaller would make our server scale better. But if you have a limited set of resources, you'd rather improve the user perception first, worry about the server second, and that's where we are with it.
So the data for search as well as the engine, basically you send the query to Tony, you get the results back, or do we get the data and have our own?
No, we have both. So we have an in-house engine which we send the request to first, and if you get results, we'll display the results. If not, then it will fall through to me, the fall through provider. So in fact, like in our front end, the web server, right, there is actually right now in the new release there is an asynchronous engine which basically sends out a whole bunch of backend tiers, which includes the ad calls that you make, as well as the engine calls that you do. So we get results back from these, and then there might be a second wave of requests that go out, and finally, when all the waves complete, we basically assemble the results.
So almost all development is C++.
No, I think the last time I pressed the numbers is about 35% of our code is C++. About 30% C++, about 35% is SQL, because in-house production stuff runs on SQL, and I would say another about 30% is XML, HTML, ASP, and it's actually tending towards more XML and XSL. In the new release, we bet on completely XML XSL architecture, so basically we have a lot more XMLs and XSLs, and then probably like 5 to 10% is Glue, which is like Perl and other guys.
And so are you noticing at all any performance issues with XML?
Oh, absolutely, a lot of them. We notice a lot of problems. So we worked with, search will be the number one property to have high volume use of XML XSL on the server, not rendered down to the client. And we do it on the server because we cannot depend upon what version of engine is on that client. And we don't want to, and each version has differences in the way they compose the transform runs. So we decided we'll run it on the server. So which is a scalability problem in some sense. The XSL transform is an extremely compute activity, and today it takes about 19 milliseconds for us to do the transform. And any slight variation, we have done like we happen to add a few more rules, and immediately the time went up to 23, 24 milliseconds, and the throughput went down from 100 to about 60 QPS. So it's very perceptible. The computational load change kind of transforms into the throughput very easily. There are a lot of rules in how you compose XML and XSL, and that's not codified anywhere in a clear fashion. There are kind of tools which allow you to do that, but tools are extremely at human readability perspective, not at performance and analysis perspective. The final version that we had worked out is like basically a kind of a compromise that we arrived with the XML team, having them code review it and kind of give us feedback on how the XSL has to be written. But still, it's like a magic art how we got this kind of optimization that's available.
So is the XML is there a separate XML team which is looking at the tools for the?
No, they're not looking at tools. They're just building XML, XSL, and XStar, XPath, and XSLT and stuff like that. They just build that's MS-XML.dlr.
I see.
Yeah.
So have you looked at there's a group that's playing with doing XML, XSL transformations in hardware, right? It was called eSwitch or P-Switch.
eSwitch.
Yeah, what about them?
In Microsoft?
Yeah, in Microsoft. They had a pizza box thing that they were playing with. I don't know how.
Right, but that's at a different angle. That's for business. So basically, all the businesses are going towards XML, right? So they want to build a router, which will again take requests again. It's all XML requests.
This is Intel has this hardware.
Yeah, Intel is playing with it also, but I was surprised. There's a group at Microsoft that was doing this.
eSwitch.
eSwitch.
A mouse group?
There is a website on it, so you can take a look at it. But I was like, I don't know where it will end up. If it is like, it's a compute problem, right? It's a nice problem to kind of put it in hardware like SSL was once upon a time, and we have a lot of hardware solutions right now.
Another question about how do you measure throughput? When you say throughput, are you talking about the server's throughput, or are you talking about the end-to-end throughput between, let's say,
client? Well, so it depends upon so we look at performance counters on the server, which will be server-side throughput. But then really we try to run tools from the client, which will basically measure at the client end of the picture.
Do you see a lot of difference between the two throughputs? For example, the server throughput will tell you the utilization of the box and everything like that.
Right.
So you, I mean, the operation from a cost point of view, you might be happy there. I mean, it's all busy. But on the client side, you may not be.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding.
It's latency, right? It's almost a latency.
It's a latency.
But tell me, what is the throughput that this client sees? I mean, do you ever test that, or that's not an important scenario at all?
You mean throughput, meaning number of page refreshes that I can do on the client?
Transactions coming back to the client.
Right. We don't do any measurement of how long it takes to render a page on the client, very strictly.
But presumably also some of this is a client latency thing, right? The client.
But no, client latency is built into the server though, because as you pointed out, right, if we have slow links,
Right.
the server actually, the way the current architecture is, the thread actually waits. ASP architecture, which is bad, but it actually waits till the data gets flushed out.
Oh, so you see all of
So
that.
we see that. If you had a different architecture, then we wouldn't see that. But right now we do. So in fact, that puts the pressure on the number of threads that we have. And I think the recent incarnation, I heard that like search in a beta site, we're running at about 720 threads. Why? It's not like we intended to keep these many threads. We use like about 5 or 10 different components inside our system. Each one decides to keep their own thread pools and number of threads that they create and manage them. So we end up with a huge amount of threads. So that has to be rethought. So we have to do that work in the future. But that is very common phenomena. When you, I run into this in the hosting team right now. I'm working on a project. I take a component, it's give it to me as a library, and I can kind of use it. It gives a lot of rich functionality. But then it turns out when I initialize the component, it immediately creates a thread pool with about 15 threads, because they have certain things that they want to do with the thread. And that's pretty common phenomenon. A lot of control structures get created because they're available for free.
It's come free.
Well, from that perspective of that developer, I talked to this guy and he told me, oh, I can guarantee you good reliability because I control all the threads.
So you can guarantee poor locality.
He doesn't know about it. I told him like that. Win2k has a thread pool, which is pretty decent. It doesn't have all the functionality, but it's pretty decent. And so I was just motivating him to use that thread pool.
He wrote his own thread pool too.
Oh yeah.
It's a real program.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, sure.
The bad part is he's supplying this as a library within the company. There are components which actually link to this library, and each one initializes their own copy of the library. They end up with multiple copies of thread pools.
Right. Yeah, you hear that one over and over again, whether it's in memory management or thread pools or all of them.
Right. So I think some tool which could actually do control structure analysis, like not necessarily the whole memory analysis, would be really beneficial. Like I can attach to a process, kind of look at who are the sources for various control structures. And I think I was like yesterday night I was sleeping over it, and I think the problem of this duplicated libraries is almost like subsequences in DNA, right? They're all identical. So there's a pattern recognition problem to kind of.
Very particularly, like since 91% of our DNA is considered junk DNA, 95% of these libraries should be considered junk code.
In fact, the same algorithms work for finding that kind of code.
Yeah, it's a very good.
They're both based on suffix trees.
I don't know the exact algorithm, but I was just thinking they're identical problems. So
They are.
I'm sure like there is some way to go find it out. So it's a pretty good research problem too. Scalable.
If you're interested, there's a book that sort of talks about both of those problems.
So you gave us this great example about search stopped working. Do you have examples of search began taking too long, or?
Oh, I mentioned to you that problem, right? You were there when the URL encoding, HTML encoding happened, right? That was a problem where it's like so availability problem is not about something failing as much as the delays.
Right. And do you have something in place to help you understand?
We have a lot of performance counters,
Okay.
but we have to visually look at them, and it's pretty hard. So group correlation would be very useful. And actually, specifically, there are two ways of group correlation, right? One is taking a set of performance streams and doing aggregation on them. The second is for a particular user request, what happens across the whole network in the cloud. And that's the problem which I was trying to motivate. It's like I initiate a request. What does it mean in terms of number of network calls that go across all sort of boxes, and what is it's like the call trace, right? We do the instruction counting and like time measurements, but similarly here we need to augment that with the memory cost as well as the network overhead of these calls that go out.
So when you talk about memory cost, you just mean the number of bytes used, or are you worried about other things like, are you worried about what's happening with the cache, or how local?
Well, I think for kind of most of the developers that we have, they would probably not make much. They wouldn't have much benefit from looking at the cache level unless the tools are flexible to kind of point back to think about this code piece.
Right.
Because I think I would probably say comfortably like 70% of the developers don't get it, because the kind of developers we have, several of them do XML, XSL at a very high level. They don't look at the low level things. So if you give me like the L1 cache hit is so much percentage, it's just another number to me. I won't make much sense out of it. Do you agree?
Yeah, fully.
So if there was a tool that could give you this sort of sliced information on a particular transaction through your site, but it required putting hooks into your system, is that an attractive option?
I think we will probably do that, because today most of our services and code is constructed with traces. So we have traces that's spitting out to dbmon or spitting out to some text file, and we have actually some problems today because I can do tracing within a C++ component. I can't do tracing across multiple languages because I want to do tracing from my XSL. When you are doing this rule, emit a trace, and I want to have the trace accumulated along with my C++ trace from the component. Today I can't do that. In a very easy fashion I can't do that unless I figure out a totally new set of components and install them, manage them and stuff like that. So having cross-language kind of a trace mechanism, if we have one, we'll just use it. Like most source codes have their own tracing, homegrown tracing in some sense.
Yes. But what about, so how much?
And we don't bother about the overhead there. Again, because we want to be able to turn it on and off.
Right.
That's all.
But would hooks in just your code, would that be enough? Because when you're getting these components from other people, you don't have the ability to add hooks into there, do you?
Yeah, so I think the good tool would be like, I think Mutex was a pretty good tool. It would instrument on the fly, attach to a process rather than like require a process to be started, because sometimes I don't even control the process. Right? And it would work with and without symbols.
Yes.
And it will work with and without source code. And it will do aggregation.
So you said that sort of all these things tend to build in tracing. Are there other things that tend to get built into all these codes that sort of cut across different projects that are sort of common infrastructure that everybody builds themselves?
Perf mod counters and event logs, we do that.
You guys use WMI?
No, not yet.
Yeah, that's a question I was going to ask. Have you looked at it at all?
No. I guess like it's not at least last time we looked at it, I couldn't do a good job with Ubuntu on it, and we didn't go back and revisit. Again, as you pointed out, the ship cycles times are very small.
Right.
So we have to build on what the existing platforms are, not get on the new coming technology most of the time.
Yeah,
so we try to keep
Have you guys looked? I mean, there's a lot of work on adding WMI instrumentation to ASP Plus to IIS for ASP Plus.
ASP Plus is coming out in end of next year, and that's like 4 ship cycles and services.
Sure, but they're committing a code now that's going to be the instrumentation that's in there. So this is your only chance to look at it and influence what they're doing.
So actually we will move to the beta
You don't have a lot
version.
of time to do this, but what?
No, we'll move to the beta version of ASP Plus. We are kind of
Right.
figuring out the deal with Scott Guthrie and gang, saying, okay, we'll promise to deploy beta versions of ASP Plus if you promise to have a developer at the box within 8 hours of us finding a problem. That kind of, the SLA kind of deals with them. So if that thing goes through,
MSN.com is doing that.
yeah, we want to be able to move to
Search was not
ASP
looking at it
Plus.
for the next cycle.
Okay.
So we'll move to the beta version simply for that reason, that
Right.
if we find some stuff now, they agree to fix it, no matter what it does to them.
Right. And another problem
They
that we
pull
run
people
into
and
is
do it
like
that way.
resources.
Right.
Like for example, when SQL Server 2000 was coming out, till it was almost ready for RTM in July. In Search, we used like 8 SQL servers, and we didn't try to upgrade any of the boxes, even to test it. And after that, in mid of July is when we upgraded and started doing testing run for about a month. We found a couple of problems, we gave back to them. But you could have asked, like, should we have started earlier? We were just too bottleneck on resources.
Sure, but
the resources I mean, like including people plus hardware.
Yeah, I understand. What I'd encourage you to do though is to go look at the spec. There's a real clear spec for what they're going to instrument, what instrumentation they're going to add to the WMI, what WMI instrumentation they're going to add to the SP code. So, it might, your time for taking an hour now to read that spec might be well rewarded, even if not for a long time.
Another point. Have you guys heard of Vista?
I haven't.
I have heard of Vista. It's the VC++ tracer, right?
Okay, you have heard of it. Very good. I didn't know about it, so I just heard about it.
I don't know about it either, so you can tell me about what it is.
I haven't used it. So
I was going to ask you the second question. If you haven't used it, why haven't you used it? or I don't know anything about it, so it's not a trick question.
I guess it's a very easy question to answer. One is like my time was too booked to investigate new things. Two is it's my internal perception right from the time I started in the company. Visual C++ is for external bozos and we use internal tools. So sorry.
That got recorded.
I know.
We should erase that part.
For external paying customers.
Well, I talked with the Visual C++ team several times about problems in testing and debugging IS servers, and it just took a lot of time for them.
Yeah, the advertising campaign.
PPRC.
Is security or for type of attacks type of issues problems?
They are a problem, but I think we haven't run into those problems. Security, I think there are two angles of security, right? One is the authenticated security, authenticated access control, which we have very less of in the MSN services world of things. But in the NetDocs hosting world, which the team that I belong right now, it's all about security. There's a ton of stuff that's going on in security, and it's very scary. We use passport profiles and access control. Access control is all on top of it. There's no clear way, again, on a per request, what are the kind of security contexts do I navigate on? And would that be a problem? We can't say that today in good faith.
But have you seen evidence of systematic attacks against various MSN properties?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, Search, we saw one problem. What happened is we had a URL in our directory. Apparently, I think the domain expired, and that got bought over by webhideout.com, which is a company in New Zealand, and they basically rent out domain names for all porn sites in the world. So all of a sudden, this was a good-looking result that is coming back from our directory. You click on it, you'll be taken to our porn site.
I see.
And they were doing it only for URLs that get referred to from MSN. Not from Yahoo, not from Lycos.
Right.
So they were just like spoofing us completely. So, and the organization who owned that URL really, they sent mail saying, oh, they'll file a legal case against us and whatnot because we are sending them to porn site. But so that is some sort of I would call a hack.
Right. But you haven't heard of anything more serious attempts against Expedia even or something like that. Expedia isn't part of Microsoft.
Well, Expedia had this credit card leak at one point.
They had a credit card leak.
Right. But I think there is a pretty small number of people that got affected by that. And we don't have credit card very much, right? In MSN services, we don't have much credit card, but the NetDocs hosting, Decentral, all those guys have credit card behind the billing system.
Hotmail also had a leak, right, where they were exposing the username.
Yeah. Hotmail.
If you click on some links.
Yep. And even if we have some, and if we haven't found it, we don't know. And maybe the user also hasn't found it. There's no black, there's no kind of what you call like a sheet which kind of tests, evaluates if all the URLs that you send out is good quality URL. We don't have that. It's like, call it as a shield, right? We don't have the shield.
So let me play back and see if I'm characterizing this accurately. So the biggest tool that you guys use is Perfmon.
If you have the time to do it, yeah.
which is there.
Well, I think we did like depending upon time, right?
And
I think David gave a talk about profilers, and we did some we ran some things with Quantify. We did some IceCap runs, so we got some data. In fact, like one of the guys in Search, he built the threshold to get the cache instrumentation. So we're trying to use it. Like again, it's a question of timing.
So I was trying to get to the fact that,
and we do stopwatches quite a bit.
Right.
On the stopwatches, meaning like stopwatch object inside ASP and kind of do measurement of ASP times.
But the part that I was getting about is that since you have much shorter cycles to go, like whether it takes 13 weeks or you are gradually getting things out more and more into the live stream there very fast, you'll want to have tools which are actually working on the live systems.
I think the live system we do Perfmon, but then there is there are two major tools I think MSN uses. One is IDSS, which is basically a log harvester. It harvests IIS logs across all the boxes on a daily basis, and it does post-processing analysis. But
it's that IDSS.
IDSS.
It has a website. You can just go to HTTP IDSS.
I think Internet Data Decision Support System.
We bought some company some time back.
It's a Microsoft tool?
Yeah, it's a Microsoft tool.
It's used mostly for like the
link tracking, etc.
Right, yeah, find collaborative filtering and
I see.
No, it's very tailored towards marketing right now. Right.
Yeah.
So we internal developers, like we do kind of go look at it. Okay, what kind of top queries happening? So what should I be doing and stuff like that. But it's not geared towards helping the development side. It's right now. Its major emphasis is like it's an internet data mine. So figure out how to make money out of that. So that's marketers use that tool.
What was the other one?
SockWatch is another tool that MSN teams use, which is a service operations center.
Service operations center, yeah.
A center watch. It collects Perfmon data from all the boxes, and it streams them into a SQL database, and it kind of displays them as well. So I can kind of select what cluster of machine that I want to monitor, and I'll get a Perfmon watch of this stuff. Yeah, there is also a tool called UserMon.
There's also
which collects the NT events logs from all the machines, and it basically builds event alerting system on top, and there are a bunch of such.
There's a
UserMon. Yeah, I don't know the exactly website and whatnot. The operations have a way to get to. SockWatch has a way to get to this NT event log thresholds. It will kind of display what are red events and green events. And
also we use Keynote. Do you guys use Keynote at all? Keynote, it's a different company. It's not Microsoft. Yeah, so actually a guy in our team, the same test guy who wrote a bunch of our server performance things, he wrote pieces of code that went over to Keynote. So as part of a deal that they get the code and we get some free use for some time, and then they build this product. So what that does is across Boston, Atlanta and so on, what is the time it takes to connect to your site, right, and so on. So they have these graphs which show you what
do you do with the information of, like, when you find Boston is slow or something?
See, that's the stuff why we don't pay for it. Because if you find that Boston is slow by 30 seconds, and you say, oh, that means I must make a deal with Akamai and pay them $200,000 a month or whatever it is that we would have to pay them, right? And then you look at this and say, okay, after all this is done, I'm going to speed up the user experience by half a second. Instead, look at what my total download time is. It is 12 seconds. So then this is useless to spend that much money there. So we just look at it and say, oh, it looks good. Or how do we do compared to Yahoo? The thing that it gets us is they compare your numbers with AOL, Yahoo, and what they call the top 50
websites,
businesses, not portals, top 50 general, Ford.com, for example. And so therefore you can look at it and say, are we significantly worse than the others? If you are, then maybe there's something that you need to do.
I mean, in terms of page download time.
Page download times, connect times to your server, the time to get the first byte down. There are various metrics that you can see.
Okay. So I think to answer another way your question, Jim, we collect a lot of data, more than what you would like. Like IDSS collects a terabyte of data a day, and that's the goal by end of this year. And SockWatch and the UserMon basically collects close to, I would guess, like probably 10 to 20 gigabytes of data every day. but we are, it's like a lot of data is kind of funneled in. We have no way of kind of doing anything with it. We turn around and make much better use of the data and do analysis of that stuff and link back to our code or components, zero. And I would love to see the kind of what I call as the management funnel. Is basically the way I kind of view it as like something like this. Yes. Just throw one.
Just throw them all at once.
One, please. So today, if you look at, like, I think we have a cloud of machines here, and we basically have several groups coming out: perf-mon, event logs. There is IIS logs. And there is in addition, of course, traces. We enable traces and get the traces back. And these all go into, like, each one goes into their own SQL database. And like some work gets done on top, and they have their own pretty display, and that's where it stops. There's no other link beyond this one. So today
so suppose somebody built the link. What would it tell you? What do you want to know from it?
Yeah.
Well, from there.
From all this information,
right,
what would you, as the development manager, want to know about your code?
There are two ultimate goals that I would kind of like to see happen, which I do not have any way of kind of understanding. Number one is the quality of the code and what you can do to improve the performance and availability and basically the service quality, right? The code for service quality. The second one, which I'd like to do, is better capacity planning and operations, cost control. Today we have it's like a magic art in a lot of respects how we do this, and it's running because there are a lot of people available to run it. And once we still today we have about I think if you include Hotmail, we probably have 6K to 8K machines right now, and the NetApp's hosting which we're working on calls for that alone would basically be about 2,000 to 3,000 machines minimum. Once we start adding conferencing services, real-time conferencing over the net, we're basically talking about, I would project it by end of 2001, I would be surprised to see this number go to about 8K to 15K. Well, that's a pretty broad number, 12K to 15K.
And it costs 4K a month?
5K a month per month per machine. And this number, I would only imagine it goes like higher, because our goal, and at least the hosting team, is today we have about, I think we have about 600 users. That's all we have. 600 users who have mailboxes on vCentral. But by June 2002, we want to have 3 million users. And that's a big jump from kind of hardware that we have. So I wouldn't imagine this number going up to 50K in like 2003.
That's why reliability affects our bottom line very much.
So I think this is like really very dumb the way we do it. Our management LANs are getting slowly overloaded. People are not paying attention. By management LAN carries all this traffic. Plus it also carries the code plus config updates that happen. That's all going through our management LAN.
Is there any aggregation going on?
So, none at this point. So I think one of the things which I would at least this is like the vision of how things kind of would shape up. And basically, if you take about this machine, right, I would rather see a funnel kind of getting built here, which would collect all the data that's interesting from this machine, and it also does aggregation of the data appropriately enough, and only the funnel data would kind of go back into the master funnel. And once you have it again, you got to link back to the code that we have, as well as kind of the plans that we kind of come up with. Today plans are again pretty ad hoc. There's no definition language for a capacity plan and how they kind of translate. So one way to think about it is like a capacity plan for a particular service is nothing more different than a whole bunch of components that are kind of linked up and what the component kind of offers, but we don't have that abstractions.
So before you build one of these services, do you do any kind of modeling or something to try to understand, how well it's going to perform, how many machines you're going to need to buy to host this service? I mean, Is there any
Right.
of that, or is it sort of like build it and see if it works?
No. So for instance, right now at MSN we are doing a re-architecture of both the front-end sites and the back-end ones, right? And then, of course, you are going to tweak things. You have to have some goals in mind. So what is it that you're trying to get out of it? And for us so far, the main goals have been, we have a huge army of testers. And just the way the processing is going on, just the way they do manual testing, how do we do things in a way that automation can happen? That even with the tools they have, it's easier to automate things. Or how do we cut down their test matrix so they don't have to test it across various axes of this? So that is one metric. The other metric is operations cost. What does it cost to run this thing? Both in terms of the guy who's actually going to be using some tools to update the machines and run how many machines does it cost. And one thing that we want to, one of the reasons to go to ASP Plus is it should be, if we do just a brain dead port over, in theory it should give us a 2x improvement. And if we do better things at it, if we at the same time move our stuff from various scripts to C# to the right stuff in there, it might be better than 2x, and that helps the scalability and keeps that cost down.
And there may be some low-hanging fruit, right? I mean, the Exchange, Hotmail, moving on the front-end web services to IISs and
they already done that.
CGIs into ISAPIs and so on, meant a reduction in the number of machines.
Yeah, I think so. What Hotmail moved from their FreeBSD installation Apache to not Apache, FreeBSD and whatever they had to IIS.
No, it was Apache.
May through August, they moved it, and what they gained out of it is like their traffic has grown by about 30 to 40%, and they were able to use the same boxes and handle the traffic.
That's correct.
Right.
In fact, it was like a 6-to-1 capacity increase per box. So there may be some low-hanging fruit somewhere. I don't think there is. There may be though. Okay, and also with data center, there may be also some ability now to put some higher-end servers. So
Right. So I think
the number.
Right. So you talk about we touch upon another problem, which is like today we kind of have a we buy if it's web server, we buy one kind of a box. That's all. Right. We don't even look at, hey, would it make sense to buy a box with this much memory versus this much hard disk? Well, maybe should we really buy 4 processors, or should we buy 8 processors, or should we buy just 1 processor boxes? Right? We do not have that kind of mapping that's going on, and I can do that mapping only if I can get some more data.
Well, I think what this really points to, and a real key takeaway, is that we just don't understand the cost of operations. We've got some rough proportions that clearly it's proportional to the number of machines. And there's a bunch of truisms like, oh, it's easier to administer if all the machines are exactly the same, but that's the level that our understanding is at. So the things that we can do are, well, getting the low-hanging fruit, decreasing the number of machines, but we can't make these more difficult and possibly more leveraged decisions that, if I had a smaller number of more powerful machines, that would be good in this way. If I invested in these kinds of operations tools, that would be good in this way. So,
And
it almost seems that that's just a really, but before we can even do tools to optimize this, there's the first set of tools just to get enough information to understand it.
But we get more data and not information. We collect a ton of data.
Right.
Every service.
I'm not seeing a lack of data as the problem. I'm seeing a lack of information as the problem.
I also see a lack of knowledge and then wisdom.
I'm so forgetting for information.
But we do have an estimate on operation cost per machine right now that you work with.
Well, that's I don't think there's no communication on that. Informally, what you know is like 5K per machine per month.
You know where that 5K, because that's.
It's like folklore.
But that's like almost a person per machine if
But
just
it's
people
everything.
cost.
It's electricity.
Yeah, but
it's share of the
the
building
amortized
and
cost
everything.
I think they can break it down.
of the air conditioning electricity.
I think I'm sure there are better models. Like Rex should be the right guy to pose the question.
It's broken down better, but that's a good number to walk around with because we are. It's not completely.
Yeah, but I mean, there's not a lot you can do about air conditioning electricity if that's a big percentage of it. I mean,
That's a good.
No, but I think if you do a full cost model, you would want to look at that, like number of machines kind of reduce it, but the thing is, you got to look at all the, some of the things which I did not draw out here is power on one side, another side is networking, the pipes that go out, right? You got to look at the cost.
Yeah.
The pipes are very expensive. Actually, the pipes are expensive to lay and get them initially connected up, and that takes anywhere from about couple of months to get bigger pipes. And I think the machines themselves take about 5 to 6 weeks to get them once you plan it. So to answer Jim's question, we do kind of think about what number of machines to buy before a release goes out, and you have to think about it because it takes about 8 weeks to get the machines in-house.
What is your lifetime estimate for machine? It's like
2 years. That's the warranty period that machines come with, and we basically retire at 2 years.
So that's a depreciation is really fast.
Another thing you guys could do is build batteries with longer lasting.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's unfortunately a thing that nobody knows how to do.
But yeah, so for us, the immediate, what is the difference? The tactical versus strategic, whatever. The short term stuff that we would be really happy to see are hugely better test tools. Some of the other things that he says, one reason why we are shying away from MSXML on the server is the performance bottleneck on the server. And we are afraid of having MSXML handle 30 million hits a day. And so, because that is an ideal thing to have. We have so many different kinds of browsers coming in. If you could, based on the browser sniff, based on the country sniff, etc., do cool stuff, we would love to.
And
but
once we do
don't.
that, right, we have to test it too. We do not
Right.
have how to test it right now.
Right. So basically,
Yeah.
basically we are shying away from it and saying we are just going to drop pre-rendered pieces onto the server, so that the transformation doesn't have to happen on the server
I
itself.
see. So you pre-compute the transformation
Right.
for every type
And-
of browser and store all the files.
Or every type of interesting browser, and the rest of them just fall into. So we have these
But
bucket
for
items.
something like your site, which is hit so many times a day, doesn't doing that kind of pre-computation make a lot of sense?
It does, with the difference that you can't do too many cool things sometimes. Like if you have these various parts, basically your axes are huge. Like we have partners, we have platforms like Win2K versus things.
No, but
and
I
now
think-
you're dropping the
It makes
same
it hard
thing.
to do my MSN.com,
Right.
where you're targeting
So that is-
content for each individual user.
So
So the test framework, and like particularly looking at the correctness of this generated HTML, how it will render, but not just render, that in all the various browsers, if I click on
All the various markers.
sign in, that actually do sign in.
right, or if you click on just a simple thing. This doesn't have to be across all browsers, and it's easy enough to automate using Trident. Is just click on all the links and make sure you don't get a 404. It went someplace meaningful. And this thing is easy enough to automate even, and that's what we'll end up doing, right? We'll end up writing these 20 different tools that do each piece. Whereas if you had some suite, you might even be able to sell it.
So at the very beginning, you mentioned looking at the scalability of the back-end content generation as like a specific challenge. Is that a place where tools can help, or is that just a challenge that?
No, that's a place where tools can help, and one good guy to talk to is Rico M in that area, because they are doing. England has a tool out of there called Atlantis, and US has a tool called Interpress, and B Central, MSN, and I think Money Central are running on Interpress as the publishing tool. And improving that tool would greatly help, and I think that's what Rico's team is doing. That's what they're going to do come March.
So are there any tools that you guys could imagine that just don't even exist in terms of nobody's built them, but really just the makers?
I guess I think we have like ad hoc tools for some of these things. The correlation and grouping of events and performance counters and thresholds, that's something that is not there completely.
Also,
And
what you mentioned earlier was sort of tracking across components for a
particular user request tracking.
particular user request, that sort of thing. I think.
And also like looking at not just the CPU utilization, which has traditionally been the hallmark of performance tools, sometimes is like you have two additional resources to look at. One is the network, and other is the some extent storage, either memory or disk footprint. Most time, like we try to not go to disk at all. You try to avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah, buying RAM.
These last 90 minutes, I have not heard the word I/O, and that's a little bit.
So I/O is a bottleneck in the tool that he described, Interpress. It will be a bottleneck. I/O is one of the bottlenecks. The I/O, in sense, disk access is going to be there.
But you just
In fact, that's a
mentioned
good
the key
point.
here. You don't want to go to this, so you probably have as much memory.
The runtime
as you can
systems.
get away with, right?
In the runtime
runtime
systems, we do
systems.
not have disk. Well, several services avoid going to disk, but the new breed of services, like the NetApp's hosting, right? It's hosting Exchange, and Exchange goes to disk.
Well, they tried. Yeah, Cisco server also tried.
Well, they have to go to
But
disk.
in this case, tracking, and now related to the tracking a request of a user across some of the resources you may want to report back are perhaps IOs generated by this thing. What resources do you think would be useful to understand?
Yeah, I think the visual model that I have is basically I want it to link back to my source code, much like how ISCAP or somebody would give me a report. Okay, this function or this locality has a problem, right? I would like to get that kind of a breakdown. That's like the long-term pole, right? And how do you get there is something that you have to figure out. Basically, I would like to I think the example that I gave you was I just happened to make I created a SOAP package and I sent it to a SOAP server. On a happy party, I had a bunch of APIs to create SOAP package. SOAP is simple object access protocol, and I happened to have a SOAP server to send it. But in between, what happened was the SOAP package is so huge. One, I could have used compression, provided the server and the client uses it, which is not happening right now. Two is the number of bytes that transacted across this network call. Three is should I really look at asynchronizing this call or not? Sometimes it doesn't make sense to asynchronize something, and sometimes it does. So having that kind of determination would be useful. And sometimes I may not even have parallelism in my calling application, so there's no point in making this asynchronous. But one other thing which I'm kind of in the binge on is basically any component that where we do some I/O operations, it's programmatically simpler to expose a synchronous interface. But I also want to make sure all the components kind of expose an asynchronous interface as well. So then the guy who's on top, who's composing, can kind of figure out what to use.
I was just curious. I know you guys aren't involved directly in instant messaging, but have you heard anything in particular about instant messaging issues and concerns that they have?
Yeah, I think the last time that I heard from them, I had a good chat with them about 6-7 months back. One, they use the Unix servers. The main reason they do that is the number of sockets that they can keep open at a given time is very limited on NT per box. And in their model, right, they have a constant connection to the server.
Right.
And so that costs them some amount of memory footprint and kind of connection cost. Right? So they want to keep hundreds of thousands of sockets open, and NT doesn't support it today. Even if you put a lot of RAM, it still doesn't support it because their non-page pool, which is what the bottleneck is limited to 128 megabytes. So, because the socket handle is allocated of non-page pool. So they basically have to kind of grow out, and they have given the feedback to NT team, and it doesn't happen yet. So that's one major bottleneck that they have.
Is that getting fixed in Whistler? No.
No, I don't think so. I haven't heard anything on that front. So, and Hotmail, again, Hotmail store is running on
The big box.
the big Solaris boxes. And you probably know the reason, I/O. And the directory mapping logic. And there are a ton of data structures in NT, if you want to probe into, which all use non-paged pool memory, and none of these scale beyond a certain limit. Well, good thing they're changing the heat for Blackcomb.
Are they?
Yeah, at least they're planning to.
Planning to do everything you can imagine for Blackcomb.
Very scary.
It'll either all get cut or it'll not.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah.
Very scary. They did change the key for Windows 2000.
No, that's like a teeny
Yeah.
fraction of it.
Yeah.
It got hacked.
Yeah, I would consider it changing. Great. We did notice, I think, one thing which really helped is the SQL 2000 team did some work in the replication engine, which showed about 3 to 4x improvement in our replication time when you moved from SQL 7 to SQL 2000. So one thing which I'm really happy to see, something coming out like substantially well in a particular release. And externally it was never messaged that is a big feature improvement, but it helped. So I think so in terms of the new thing, have event analysis, perf-mon analysis, and all of these suffer from the same problem, just correlation and grouping and thresholds. The next is capacity planning, which will be there are two aspects. One is usage profile, individual request kind of usage profile, as well as I think MSN doesn't see this. In the hosting team, we will see this. There is a group profile as well, which we need. And I'll be having organizations subscribe, small business to large business, whatever it is. And basically, we want to be able to understand the group utilization of resources.
So is that just aggregation across the criteria? Or
I would think it's an aggregation.
You want to measure the group directly. You can't see.
Well, so it depends upon how we model and how the system provides facilities for it. Right? I don't know right now. At the simplest level, you would say I can take a set of streams and aggregate them. That should be it. But if there is parallelism, then that's a different story. This and also across servers, which is very vital. This profile has to be across the whole cloud. And I think network and storage, you talked about utilization factors and this.
Do you have tools for seeing that in terms of the network?
Today we use SNMP. Some of the alerts are triggered off from SNMP because routers support SNMP. So that's what is used. That's another kind of data trace that goes back into the engine. The guys in our team, I talked to the NetApp hosting team, they use a third-party alerting system called Operations Manager, which comes out of a company called NetIQ. We just did a deal with NetIQ, yeah. So basically they use their tool to kind of look at this stuff. I'm not sure what kind of relationship we have with them. And they also use another tool called ECM, which is Enterprise Config Manager, which is to manage the cluster as a whole, that NT doesn't allow us to do. The final kind of need is availability measure, which is basically, I think availability is a very funny concept. None of us have got a clear definition of it. Delays are an availability problem too. So we have to kind of have a better definition. Once you have it, we should be able to measure that against that particular metric. And today, what we look at, the SockWatch looks at basically what percentage of time is my server up. That's what it reports. 99.x% of my time is up. But it doesn't include what the user saw from the availability perspective. So that's. So
can that be done from within inside Microsoft, or is that something that's really sort of an external
availability
point? Yeah. Because availability is not just sort of Microsoft; it's everything between Microsoft and the
customer, right?
Well.
Yeah, I think actually Keynote does part of that. So if you look at the Keynote number, part of what you get out of that is what percentage of the times did they run into errors. So it could even be that your site has 10 images, and out of those 10, 3 didn't come through. So they'll mark that as 3 errors. So you have all that data now. How you interpret it and what you do with it is.
But I just learned a limitation. The Keynote only measures simple HTTP verbs.
Right.
It doesn't do post and it doesn't do DAV. DAV is an emerging protocol, and the hosting uses DAV a lot. So, and Keynote doesn't have the technology people to kind of develop new technologies to kind of run it fully as well. So what it means is it's a Microsoft problem to kind of build the shield, as well as things that will be running outside the shield as well. And at least we should have the framework and the model of aggregating and collecting and aggregating the data. And then who runs it is an independent story.
Right.
We can kind of give that off to Keynote or some contract to have it run externally.
And again, the Keynote, actually the interesting thing about Keynote is they make presumably a lot of money by giving the service out to other people. But the service has severe limitations and you use it because there's nothing else. For instance, it assumes that there is nothing cached on your machine. So for instance, in the case of MSN, all the little buttons which say go or some stuff, they're all really cached on user's machine. So the Keynote data is not indicative of what the user is saying. But there's nothing you can do about it because otherwise you write your own tool. So
plus we've heard that their strategy for how they do their supposed geographic distribution of how they sample things is really completely
right.
It's not with respect to network topology in any intelligent way. It's just They put it in places that people who are paying the money for the service think they need to cover geographically in some sense.
Well,
And
they
it's
have.
easy it's easy to spoof them too.
Yeah, they have some.
But if you spoof them, yeah, you can have code specific to Keynote and spoof them. But then you're paying them for this service, and if you spoof them,
Yeah, but you also know that
advertisers look at
our-
it. Yeah.
People are looking at our numbers, and other people are paying Keynote for all the MSN numbers.
True.
So we should get like when Spencer was scared.
Or really huge response time. So the other people say, you're looking good.
You're way ahead. Yeah.
We're
Stop
way
working.
ahead.
I mean, Keynote's real business model says something about using their data for things like ad revenue and stuff like that as well. So that's you would have a financial incentive to spend.
Yep. You show it to the ad guy and say, look, I'm better than these other guys, so you should spend more money with me. Yeah, so you're right. That's your incentive to do that.
Yeah, another one is security, which I think it's less of an issue with MSN. I think there is some amount of privacy issues with MSN. Yeah, there's personalization that happens, but it becomes more an issue when we start doing the business hosting services.
So the idea would be to have some tools that help track some security variants. Is that what?
We don't right now. We don't. We kind of believe we have individual points. Each component has something that it enforces, but across all the components, for a user, we would not know. If a user has really authenticated path across the whole system, we don't know. So that's, I think, pretty much. I guess maybe we should turn around. It's like, what have you guys thought about? When is it coming out?
It was not a landslide question.
Tomorrow?
It's interesting because we have thought quite a lot about this problem of collection and aggregation and analysis of data. And it's a big problem, and we don't have anything that we're in the process of building, but you kind of confirmed that that's an important area to pay some attention to. So we're leaning toward, I guess I'd say, building some infrastructure to do that, not so much to build tools directly, but to build infrastructure that lets people easily build tools that take advantage of a nice ability to do various kinds of aggregation, analysis, to basically have functions and predicates so you can combine data either locally or, as you put it in the more centrally, and then to make it pretty easy to use these either the large data sets themselves or sampled data out of the large data sets for other kinds of tools.
With the key being to be able to tie this information to a particular user request going across various components, right?
Well, that's almost orthogonal, but yeah, that's another piece that we've put a lot of thought into. We've tagged it with a lot of different names. The one that stuck for a while was FedEx tracking. To be able to, where is your request right now, and what's the context it's in, and gather information about what happens in response to a particular user request, insofar as we can. And there are a lot of difficult problems in doing that. We think we can do some things just by basically grabbing some things at RPC boundaries and wrapping them up. But we're not the first people to look at that. Vista actually tried to do some of that without a tremendous amount of success.
The Hewlett Packard guys also are trying to come out within the eSpeak framework, some framework to help do all of this. Another aspect that I've heard by visiting other sites, sorry, I blanked out, has to do with
So what is the time frame for this?
Yeah, I don't think we have actually nailed down exactly what projects to do. So what we had been doing for the last, I think, over 2 months now, is kind of like to really understand this space and really get a good understanding of what are the problems people are facing. So a lot of thought has gone, like David was talking about, how do you, do live monitoring, or what kind of tools should we build, which are, event-based tools or things like that to really, to look at that. And not only those aspects, but also the issues of testing and reliability, and especially in the live environment stuff there. We are at this stage right now where we, actually, I think at this end of the month, where we really want to nail down the exact projects that we want to go ahead and do. Some of those projects are things that we can do in the short term, and there are a lot of these areas which are going to be more as a researchy part, because we do not exactly know how to do it, so that we'll spin those off as basically as research projects at that point there. We'll definitely run those by you, and that was one of the reasons why we wanted to invite you was to kind of like, because you're right there in the forefront, and to say this is a tool we need yesterday, kind of a thing there which can really help us direct our thinking there.
Right. Yeah, we definitely we're inviting you to influence our priorities.
Yeah, well, hopefully, I think it will help you.
No, and not only that, I think
there's a lot of people who would kind of benefit. I think you kind of see the number of personnel. I think if you look at any team, like the number of personnel that we can have, like, could be redeployed to do some more creative things at a faster pace.
Yes. The thing that we want to do is, after we kind of have a sort of like a cut as the as the project's there, we want to come back to see your feedback of what you think about those projects, to really see, is that something, if something like this was something that we really went ahead and built it, will that help you in your day-to-day stuff there? And that would give us a little bit, once we have that will give us a little bit more clearer idea of when can we reasonably expect those two to sort of like happen.
That's actually a good point. So what was that tool that actually ships in the box that clusters your different servers and deploys code out to them?
App server.
App server 2000, App Center 2000.
Yeah,
so
application center.
Yeah, the 2000 version, right? So we had a talk by their one of their lead PMs to deploy that on our site, but as it ships, it's not of much use to us.
That's right.
So you've gone in and built this thing, which is really.
But I think that goes to Murali's point, like because we are only. We're doing for internal tools. We don't care about external bozos. So so if it doesn't work for you, it's useless.
Yeah, but this is a stupid approach for the company to take, because what we're doing today is what fairly modern, medium-sized businesses are going to be doing by 2003. And the stuff that we're shipping today is going to be in use in 2003.
Can I ask why App Center didn't work?
All right, so they had this was mainly a meeting between the App Center guys and the Ops guys, and I wanted to sit in to understand pieces of it. So they make certain assumptions, I think, on how the files actually get copied to the different clusters. And we, for instance, the way we typically deploy them is we deploy them, like, put one cluster in rotation, let the other ones be, and then later on put in more, or things like that. What was the other? There was actually, I can find out the exact reason. There were two big why we can't do reasons. And
every machine has to be in sync completely.
There were two big things that were stumbling.
We will have some machines not out of sync too, because we might have database running on that, right? And two is they have a monolithic model of assuming that everything has a particular model. They have their own SQL database where they stream things, and it's not extensible out. And for us, it has to be extensible. Third, I don't know, they have a limitation of 12 machines.
No, they actually said that they'll scale. So that wasn't. One of the other things was, how much does their code take on the server? So what percent of CPU is gone running their stuff? And that was, they came back up with, I think, 13%, which we were afraid of, that 13% of the CPU is consumed using our stuff. And so there were two big stumbling blocks, which I don't remember. One of them was not this. This was the secondary.
There's another project that's going on in research that's sort of in this area, very closely related to the Ops Capacity Planning App Center thing. It's called BIG.
Yes.
You guys probably have heard about that, right? Yeah. So it tries to address both the issue of, how do you roll out images to multiple machines and multiple kinds of machines more easily. Plus they have this notion of having a logical model of different machine types and their connectivity, which is separate from the number of physical instances of those machines and their physical instances of the connectivity. And it tries to keep those in sync. In other words, it'll guarantee that if you've specified a certain topology, that topology is maintained. If you've specified that certain machines only talk to other machines, that's maintained, and so on. And it also tries to come up with a underlying mechanism to enforce policy on when, for example, you need to add a new machine. When load reaches certain, I should add a new front end and deploy it and what to do and so on. So they're trying to combine all of those different elements into a single thing, and that's another one that I think will be relevant to your space.
I think I read through some of the documents, and recently they put that as a security wall garden, so I'm not able to access any documents. So maybe if I can get access to them.
Sure, I'll get you some copies
Okay.
of the documents.
Thank you.
And then one thing we should explicitly mention, I guess you talked a bit about sort of test frameworks, and right now that is not on our list of things that we're considering.
Would you consider? Because that's something which I think across the company, there is no clear framework for testing as well as error propagation. And I think they tie in together in some sense. Like testers, most of the people who write automation tests, they test for the correct cases quite often, not the wrong cases. And the customer usually hits the wrong cases, as usual is the case. So when you look at our ship cycles, testing is the longest pole. It takes a long time. It's like, I'm not talking about even performance testing here. It's like real testing.
Have you talked at all to the Greenspoon's team about their testing plans with Test Enterprise?
No, actually, I haven't talked to them.
We haven't recently either, but I know they are planning to do something in the test framework.
But Murali, from your
Test framework, actually.
Well, the whole question is what level of framework
Yeah,
is
exactly.
That's generalizable,
right,
and what level winds up being fundamentally group specific.
Yes.
There's so many test frameworks out there,
Exactly.
each of which individual groups seem to...
I think something like
Saurabh is looking at a web-based, web-driven framework to drive components. ASPs, go through script, recording, replaying back, having an editing framework,
something in the order of I think what Source Depot did when you moved to Source Depot versus when we were in just Slime for that matter. Right? And the kind of tools that are built on top of Source Depot are widely usable by everybody else, and we kind of use it. So it's like the framework. I'm not talking about individual test cases, right? Yeah, everybody kind of has a model of, they have a database which is a repository of test cases,
yes,
and they have a model of how these test cases are run. They have a model of flagging these test cases. I think those probably is the most abstract thing that I would think a framework provides. And individually creating a test
distribution system also.
Yeah, have you looked at OSS?
Yeah, I know what
That's the stuff that Office runs,
yeah,
right?
but everybody, it's like Office has OSS, then you have NT has like a what is it called, test enterprise, so test enterprise or something, and then everybody, that's a test distribution system. So everybody has their own unique ones that are there, and there are too many of them in the company.
Right.
How do you really, at what level do you try
Each
to?
group claims that the other groups are totally unsuitable for their purposes.
Right.
I think the other one which I remember is one other thing which we have quite often, which a framework can help us, is basically we aggregate components from multiple parties, right? And today we just get we get header files and libraries and DLLs. If you get source code, that's like little next step. But then if you can get really some sort of a testing harness component along with the thing, that's really golden. And we don't have that model. There is no model of, if I build a component, what is the test suite that I kind of supply with this component? There's no standardized model or kind of programming paradigm to that.
Yeah, I remember very well back in the Da Vinci days, consuming MDAC components, and it was just wild. It was you needed exactly what you described, and nothing like that ever.
Right, so it might be not just like you building it, right? You just specify the frame. If if you dance to this kind of beat,
then
you help everybody else, right?
And I complete the phrase that I spaced out earlier.
Absolutely.
Not again.
What we've heard also from the outside, some sites, is their need to address dynamic generated content, and then their interactions with the CDNs, how
CD?
the content delivery networks,
Akamai.
the Akamai of the planet, and how all of that affects all the way out to the user. that's kind of a new realm for a bunch of sites.
We haven't atomized quite a bit. Have you? No. I think across Microsoft, MSN, we haven't done very much of atomization.
Some of our high-end customers, they see a proliferation of intranet IISs, right? So the departmental e-sites. And so from the perspective of the central organization that's pushing content out, now you have all of this content replicated in those intranet sites. So your content management gets more complex because you also have to deal with these 50 other copies that you didn't want to think about.
Mm-hmm.
So the overall notion of content management kind of transcended the first firewalls into the intranet to go deal with all the departmental services also.
Okay.
So that's not something that you're thinking about, but it's something that is hitting some of our customers.
I think I might kind of take that at an abstract level, and I think that's a problem for Microsoft. And when I talk about these components and libraries being aggregated, that's like a content problem, right? I have somebody who created this component library. It's available in Toolbox. It's available in their dev machine. It's available as 10 different copies across the network as well. And he makes another bug fix. It doesn't get propagated. And later on, we hit the same bug. We go through the same QFE process in some sense.
And that points to what you just said before with App Center and with you, the difference in your operational setup. They want sort of a lockstep, big switch type of approach, while you have more like
loosely
kind. These 20 are the same, these 30 are the same, but not everybody may be the same.
Right.
So I've seen in a couple of these sites outside that they really try to go very militaristically in the lockstep, big switch approach to minimize the nightmares of changes, right? Of matrix for testing and so on.
Yeah.
Okay. What relative importance do you put on load, stress, and failure simulation? If we were to have an environment taken care of, like dynamic instrumentation, not worry about symbols.
Symbols, meaning?
Say like PDB symbols, you say, like your tool has to work
without symbols
and they were the dynamic instrumentation-based tools, like you mentioned, very good in that respect. Say they were, we have certain fault injection infrastructure that we are in process of upgrading to add dynamic instrumentation support. But I see to the size of your team and development life cycle, you were asking us to move a little more aggressively into prepackaged stress failures, simulation failures for network, connectivity, stress, memory, disk.
Right.
What importance would you put in this area for your development?
Right. So I think if in the last 6 months we hired one new guy in the MSN Search test, and basically he spent like 4 months trying to develop some abstract stress harness, right? Which doesn't cover all the entry points. It covers a certain set of entry points. He collects a whole bunch of performance counters and stress event logs and kind of makes some decision. And he finally churns out a report every day. So the development cost is about 4 months roughly, and then that's for a subset, right? I'll call it say 40 to 50% coverage, and the daily churn rate is about 2 to 4 hours, anywhere from that. And the level of information that he collects is again like 60 to 70%, not 100% that we would like to collect. So a good harness would kind of help him get up to speed without having to reinvent everything. And today all of us are reinventing. Every group is reinventing. Though we kind of like to say that we share common things, we don't. Unless it's a compiler, right? We cannot reinvent ourselves.
The name of this person who is trying to create this?
I think we can talk to Craig McMillan. Just get an understanding that he runs MSN Search, stress and performance. And well, it also turns out that I think quite a few of the testers' perf goal happens to be invent a new architecture for test framework. Right. So we might redefine their jobs.
Actually, on our team, you can contact Feisu, Feisu. He does a similar stuff for MSN. Feisu.
But I think last time, when I talked, they talk about like we needed a single source for symbols. And I know that there is a symbol server right now, which is a pretty good deal. And in fact, if you want to do online dynamic annotation, and we're all going to run within Microsoft Network, you can even like link to that same simple service.
Yeah.
If you just infer the versioning and stuff like that. But again, if you take care of the burden, nobody else need to worry about it.
Yeah. Because Vulkan has become dynamic now.
Okay.
So it can dynamically insert probes.
Other questions?
And to simplify, I think, sorry, one more thing which I want to point out is that the cost of adoption of these tools has to be as cheap as possible.
Yeah.
Because quite like when you mentioned Vulkan, right? It's like I have tried to deal with it for a while, and it's like high cost for adoption.
Yeah, but see the thing is that Vulkan is not a tool in itself. It's it's an infrastructure. So there is a cost associated because you have to build a tool on top of it.
Right.
So there is a cost associated.
Okay.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure meeting
Thanks,
guys.
Rohit.
Really appreciate the time.
Materials supplied by Microsoft Corporation may be used for internal review, analysis, or research only. Any editing, reproduction, publication, rebroadcasting, public showing, internet, or public display is forbidden and may violate copyright law.